You've got one country with absolutely unmatched power, a global badge, but here's the thing, without global consent. It is, without a doubt, one of the most explosive questions in modern politics, and today we're going to try and get right to the heart of it.
So here it is. This is the central question, isn't it? It's the one that has driven decades of foreign policy, endless debate, and yeah, a lot of conflict. Should one single nation really carry this kind of responsibility? Or is it a burden it should have dropped a long, long time ago?
You see, at the heart of all this, there are two completely opposing ways of looking at the world. On one hand, is America a defender of freedom, a necessary force for stability in a really chaotic world? Or is it actually the biggest destabilizing force of our time? Let's dive into both sides. Okay, first up, let's look at the argument for America's role as the world's policeman. This perspective basically sees America's power not as some kind of choice, but as a historical necessity. The core of this argument is really rooted in history. I mean, think about World War II, right? Nazi Germany wasn't defeated by some peaceful negotiation. It was defeated by overwhelming, brutal force. Imperial Japan's expansion across Asia, it was stopped by American power. The point here is simple. When you're facing true evil, doing nothing isn't an option. Power becomes a moral duty.
And, what happened after the victory is maybe just as important. America didn't just conquer Europe, it rebuilt it. You've got the Marshall Plan, which turned former enemies like Germany into strong democratic allies, and then NATO was founded, creating this security alliance that has, for the most part, kept the major world powers from fighting each other directly for over 70 years. That kind of stability, it wasn't an accident. It was enforced.
And this role didn't just stop in the 20th century. Proponents will point to a ton of modern examples, stepping in to stop genocides in places like Bosnia and Kosovo, while everyone else just debated, or leading international anti-piracy missions to keep our sea lanes safe, providing disaster relief on a scale nobody else can, and, of course, securing the global trade routes that our entire economy pretty much depends on.
So here's what this argument really boils down to. It admits that, yeah, America's actions are not always perfect. Far from it. But it asks a really uncomfortable question. If America steps back, who steps forward? You think Russia or China are going to fill that power vacuum? This view argues that, look, a flawed protector is probably better than the chaos that could come without one.
But of course, that's only half the story. Now we have to look at the other side, because for every argument for the badge, there's a really powerful one about its devastating cost. This side of the coin focuses on the destructive and often unintended consequences of American intervention. This perspective argues that America doesn't just fight villains, it often creates them. You can see this in what's called the cycle of blowback, where the unintended consequences of a policy just boomerang right back and hit you. So, Cold War strategies to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan, they led to arming the Mujahideen. From the chaos of that war, the Taliban emerged. Al-Qaeda was formed, in part as a direct reaction to the U.S. presence in the Middle East. And ISIS, it rose from the power vacuum left after the invasion of Iraq. In this view, America is constantly running around fighting fires that it helped to start. And the cost of fighting those fires, well, it's just staggering. We're talking about over 20 years of continuous war in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's trillions of dollars spent and, tragically, millions of lives lost. And for what? After all that, the Taliban are still in power in Afghanistan? From this perspective, that is not policing. It is a catastrophic failure. And then there's this whole issue of morality, or maybe hypocrisy. The stated ideal is almost always spreading democracy, but critics point to this long, long history of actions that completely contradict that, like overthrowing democratically elected governments in Iran in 1953 and Chile in 1973, just because it suited American interests at the time. This kind of selective morality is seen as a core part of the problem. And this quote right here, it just perfectly sums up the counterargument. It reframes the whole metaphor. A policeman who breaks the law to enforce his own version of order isn't some flawed hero. He is, in the words of one critic, simply a criminal with a badge. So, which one is it? Is America the hero or the villain? Well, the truth, as it usually is probably way more complicated than that. Maybe, just maybe, it's possible for America to be both at the exact same time. Perhaps the real issue here isn't America itself, but just the nature of unchecked power, period. And this leads us to the core dilemma, the real pickle we're in. The world seems to simultaneously fear America's dominance and its intervention, but it also seems to be terrified of what a world without that power would look like. So let's try to hold both of these ideas in our heads at once.
It's true that immense power can save lives, like it did in World War II, but it's also absolutely undeniable that it destroys them. At the very same time, it's a lesson we see again and again in history. Power without accountability will, eventually, always lead to corruption and abuse. You see, these two statements aren't contradictory. They're just two sides of the same very complicated coin.
And so we're left with the final and maybe unanswerable question. If it's not America, then who? And if it is America, then how? How do they do it right?
This is the trap, right here. On one hand, if America withdraws its power, you risk creating these huge power vacuums that could be filled by other actors, maybe leading to widespread chaos. But, on the other hand, if America continues its role unchecked, we might just see more nations burn in the name of imposing order. There are just no easy answers here.
And that leaves us with one last question for you to think about. Is America the world's protector, a necessary if flawed force for global stability? Or is it maybe the most powerful vigilante in history, acting on its own authority, making its own rules? Because at the end of the day, history isn't written by heroes or villains. It's written by the consequences.